So a while ago, I made a video basically talking about the Strong Boys and why they aren't exactly viewed as legitimate in the eyes of Westeros. In that video, I floated out the possibility of doing a what-if scenario, potentially talking about what would happen if the Strong Boys were legitimate. My original train of thought when I said that was, what if Viserys legitimized the Strong Boys? But as I thought about the topic more, I realized there's more than one way to make the Strong Boys actually legitimate. For example, I could have said, what if Harwin Strong married Rhaenyra instead of Laenor? They could have been legitimate that way. Or, like I'm doing now, making the Strong Boys the actual sons of Laenor Velaryon. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, that's not going to change much, but I would say you're wrong. In the Fire and Blood book, it's actually more ambiguous as to who the father is when it comes to Harwin or Laenor. In the books, they kind of reason that the Strong Boys could legitimately be Laenor's sons, even though they have dark hair, because Rhaenys in the books has dark hair from her Baratheon mother. So people just say, oh, that's where they get their dark hair from, their grandmother. But in the show, they make it very clear, very obvious that they are not related to Rhaenys. I mean, they technically are, but they are not her grandchildren. It's obvious that Harwin Strong is the father. So for this what-if scenario, we're going to make sure that these kids are obviously the children of Laenor Velaryon. They're going to be mixed race, they're going to have the white hair, the purple eyes. Even though they don't do the purple eye thing in the show, it's going to be no question that these are the children of Laenor Velaryon and Rhaenyra Targaryen. There will be no rumors of bastardy. They are unquestionable. They are truly legitimate by blood. And that's where we're going to go. I really like doing what-if scenarios, at least in my own head, because it's so fun to figure out what tweaks could actually change an entire story. This one small thing could derail the entire plot and create something new, and that's so fascinating to me. So with that being said, there will be some changes to the story, obviously. I'm not going to go past season 1 of the show. I'm not going to spoil anything from the books for my show-only fans or anything like that. But either way, I hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let's get into the video. So one of the first changes I'm going to make here is that of Laenor Velaryon. Now, you may be wondering, well, why are you changing up Laenor? Well, I feel like people don't really realize that Laenor is a pivotal character in Rhaenyra's story, and how Joffrey Lonmouth's death actually shaped him as a character. It's why he's so aloof and unattentive to Rhaenyra, not as dutiful as he could be. Laenor, for years, has been drowning in grief ever since the death of Joffrey Lonmouth. Joffrey was like the love of his life, and he watched him get beaten to death. And this is what caused him to have a disconnect with Rhaenyra and their surrogate children. Well, his surrogate children. So, in this what-if scenario, this alternate universe and timeline, we're going to have Joffrey's death affect Laenor in a much different way. Instead of it breaking him and causing him to be more aloof, it actually causes him to be more devoted to Rhaenyra. Because in real life, people, when they feel grief, they try to distract themselves from that grief most of the time. For some people, it's going out to parties, it's drinking, it's having sex, it's eating, what pretty much Laenor does in House of the Dragon. But for other people, when they're grieving, they throw themselves into work as a distraction to not feel that pain. And that's essentially what's going to happen to Laenor here. He's going to throw himself into his duties towards Rhaenyra and their children. And that's how he's going to distract himself from the death and pain of Joffrey Lonmouth. So, because he throws himself into being a dutiful husband, a dutiful consort, and fulfilling his expectations and duties, this time he's actually able to impregnate Rhaenyra 3 times and give her the 3 sons, Jacaerys, Lucerys, and later on Joffrey. In this timeline, as I mentioned earlier in the video, they will not be bastards. They are completely legitimate in every sense of the word. So, we're going to start off this what-if story in episode 6, where Joffrey is born. So our first change we're going to see here is that instead of Laenor showing up late to the pregnancy, he's already here. He's with Rhaenyra, he's supporting her, he's guiding her through it. He's been there for all of their children being born. So Joffrey is born, like in the original, and he's a healthy baby. And unlike in the original, Alicent doesn't ask to see him, because in this timeline, she has no reason to suspect Rhaenyra's up to no good. She's not mothering bastards like she was before. Her first 2 children this time have been completely and utterly legitimate, so there's no reason to suspect Joffrey. So you never get this moment where Rhaenyra has to walk through the Red Keep bleeding after giving birth and everything like that. That doesn't happen. So, in this timeline, you actually see that Rhaenyra gets a chance to relax and be with her baby, and her husband's right next to her with her the entire time. And the baby is still named Joffrey, like in the original, as a homage to Laenor's lover. Later on, you have King Viserys and Queen Alicent come and visit the baby. Nothing too major happens here. You still have that remark where Alicent says that's an unusual name, but she doesn't make an insult towards Laenor because, you know, all the children are his. There's no need to disrespect him like that. That's not going to happen here. The episode does continue to be much of the same. The kids still go to the dragon pit. Aemon still gets bullied. But one important change that I didn't mention yet is that Harwin Strong isn't going to be as important as he was in the original. In the original show, it's clear that he and Rhaenyra do have feelings for one another, but it's also made clear that Harwin Strong was there out of necessity. Rhaenyra needed children because Laenor wasn't giving her any. But in this timeline, because Laenor's a more dutiful husband, he's more effective, he's actually giving her children, there's no point in her having Harwin Strong. Even when you take into account the agreement that they had before, Harwin Strong is more risk than it is reward. I mean, sure, Rhaenyra gets to get off, but then if anyone finds out that, oh, the princess has a lover, that's not going to end well. And it's not worth taking the risk like it was in the original show. So that's not going to happen here. Harwin Strong is not going to be that important of a character, at least when it comes to Rhaenyra and the children. And because Harwin Strong is not going to be involved with Rhaenyra, this also means that Lionel Strong, the Hand of the King right now, doesn't have to cover for Harwin. He doesn't have to feel guilty about covering up his son's transgressions with the princess. He doesn't feel like he has to resign his post, and because of that, he most likely doesn't take that trip back to Harrenhal, where he gets killed by Larys. So this may mean that Lionel gets to stick around a bit longer for the time being. But with that being said, because Harwin Strong's not involved with Rhaenyra like that anymore, his role, although he doesn't really have much of one since he died so soon, for what it is, it's going to be filled by Laenor now. He's going to be the primary father figure in the boys' lives. So that whole instance in that training yard, Laenor's going to be there. Not Harwin Strong. He's going to be off doing city watch stuff. Laenor's going to be there with his sons. And it's going to be kind of tricky because Criston Cole's there too. And Criston Cole still has some favoritism towards the Green children, Aegon and Aemon. Laenor obviously doesn't really like Criston Cole because he killed Joffrey, and I don't like that they didn't display that in the actual show. They only walk by each other, I think, one time, and there's no words exchanged. I feel like it would have been better if we just showcased how much Laenor does not like Criston Cole for what he did, even if it was a simple back and forth between words, but we didn't get that in the show. So we're going to do that here with Laenor and Criston exchanging some, snide remarks as Criston Cole ignores Laenor's sons. And this eventually turns into Laenor taking over the training for his sons, Jacaerys and Lucerys. And as this happens, Criston Cole questions him about it, like, oh, you don't trust my methods of instruction. And then you have another back and forth between the two of them that eventually devolves into a little duel to see who's the better swordsman and instructor. This does end up getting broken up, though, and no one's really hurt and is completely disregarded later on. And we move on to that small council meeting that we saw towards the end of the episode with Rhaenyra and Alicent. Now, in the original show, I believe this offer was really made to give her son Jacaerys some added legitimacy. There are rumors spreading every day about who her son's father really is. She can feel the walls closing in on her. But in this timeline, that doesn't happen. Jacaerys is legitimate. All of her children are legitimate. She doesn't really have a need to marry Jacaerys to Helaena to save her own skin or anything like that. But she does still make the offer because the House of the Dragon can only stand united, not divided. She knows that tensions are strained between both sides of the family. Some people still want Aegon to be king. So perhaps if she can marry Jacaerys to Helaena, they can stop all that from happening. So the offer still comes. But unlike before, where Alicent just, dismisses this, she actually takes the time to consider it. The meeting still ends and she starts thinking of it on her own time, but unlike before, Alicent actually starts thinking, maybe I could marry Jacaerys to Helaena. And the reason for this being, as I mentioned multiple times before, is because the children are not bastards. This was such a pivotal thing in the show that I don't feel like people realize that. Alicent is a person who is not heartless. She's not some power-hungry witch like a lot of people think she is. Alicent is a character who's been taught from birth that family, tradition, duty, and honor, those things come first. And Rhaenyra is someone who is spit constantly in the face of that. since they were young, with her escapade with Daemon, then sleeping with Criston Cole that not only jeopardized herself, but this Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And then she continues to do this as she gets older, sleeping with Harwin Strong when she has a husband and having these obvious children who are bastards. Alicent has been told time and time again that Rhaenyra cannot be trusted. Rhaenyra is going to kill you and your family. And she has trusted Rhaenyra wholeheartedly for most of her life until that instance with Criston Cole. And Rhaenyra has done nothing since then to prove otherwise, at least in the original timeline, because she keeps having these bastards. From the outside looking in, it looks like Rhaenyra just doesn't care. She only cares about herself. She only cares about her own lust. She doesn't care about the rules. She doesn't care about society. She doesn't care about tradition. She's just a selfish person. That's what Alicent sees of her originally. But now, because the children are Trueborn, because Rhaenyra is actually fulfilling her duty with the right one, with her husband, Alicent has no reason to think ill of her. For us, the change is instant. For her, it's been 10 years since that incident with Criston Cole. Rhaenyra seems more responsible now, more mature and active in her duties, so when she asks for Jacaerys to marry Helaena, it seems less like a cry for help and more of her actually extending an olive branch, really trying to unite the families for the good of the realm and everyone else. And that's why Alicent is now going to really consider the possibility of this marriage. Of course, she's not going to accept right away. She's still going to end the meeting and probably talk about this with Laenor Strong. Her discussion about Jacaerys and Helaena is going to take place of that discussion that she has with Laenor about Lionel and Harwin Strong and how, they're covering up for the princess and stuff like that. So that's what that conversation is going to be about. And ultimately, Alicent is going to accept Rhaenyra's proposal because it'll probably be for the good of the realm. She's going to give it a chance. So she decides to wed Jacaerys to Helaena. And this has a lot of changes, obviously, because this means Jacaerys doesn't get engaged to Baela later on. But this also means that Rhaenyra's side of the family has more incentive to stay in King's Landing. Because the children aren't bastards in this timeline anymore, they're not being called out, there are no rumors going around, and in the original, Rhaenyra left because she wanted to escape all that, all the rumors, all the slight. She wanted to get away from that, out of sight, out of mind. But here, in this timeline, with everything going her way for the most part, with Jacaerys marrying Helaena, or being engaged to her at least, and there being no rumors about her children's parentage, she has no reason to leave to go to Dragonstone. So now it seems like the family is going to be a lot closer, much more tight-knit. They're going to stay in King's Landing, and the Greens aren't going to have their little takeover like they did later on in the first season. From here, Alicent and Rhaenyra actually begin mending their friendship earlier than they did in the original series with, the Last Supper of King Viserys, where Alicent says, "You'll make a great queen." They'll start mending their friendship a bit more, and from here we're going to go into episode 7, which is the Driftmark episode. Laena Velaryon does still die. Daemon comes back. There's some tension between him and Rhaenyra. Aemond does still claim Vhagar here because he still wants a dragon. There is still a fight in the tunnels, but Aemond does not lose his eye this time because he doesn't call them bastards. Now, bastardy, as I mentioned in previous videos and throughout this entire thing, is very important. Bastardy was a very big insecurity for Jacaerys Velaryon. In the original fight, he only pulls out the knife to attack Aemond when he calls him a bastard, not when he picks up the rock and threatens to attack Luke. It's only after he's called a bastard that Jacaerys does pull out the knife and attack Aemond. Here, that insecurity does not exist. He's not a bastard. Aemond does not have an insult in his arsenal worthy of a knife being pulled, so instead, Jacaerys just tackles him and they get into a fight. That's all that happens. It gets broken up by the Kingsguard and it's dismissed as this fight between kids. That's all it is. Rhaenyra and Daemon do still sleep together on the beach, but this time there is no plan to, get Laenor out of the picture so Rhaenyra can marry Daemon and unite their claims, because here, there is no dance happening, at least at the moment. There's no need to get rid of Laenor. This is just a moment of passion. And besides, even if they did make that plan, there's no point for Laenor. He hasn't taken a lover. There is no Carl here. And he wouldn't want to abandon his sons, who are actually biologically his at this point. He's been so devoted to them throughout their entire lives. He's not aloof like he was originally. So I don't see him just abandoning them because, hey, me and Daemon need to come together and unite our claims. There is no pressing threat of urgency in this timeline. So that most likely never happens. Daemon and Rhaenyra does not happen at all. And since there is no real incident on Driftmark, everyone pretty much just lives happily ever after and go back to King's Landing. Daemon probably goes back to Pentos though, like he said he was going to do, but leaves Rhaena and Baela behind to foster with Corlys and Rhaenys on Driftmark. There's nothing binding him to Westeros at this point since he's not marrying Rhaenyra and there's no looming threat to keep him here, so Daemon just goes to do whatever Daemon does. After that, moving on to episode 8, we have some drastic changes, like there is no discussion about the heir to Driftmark. Laenor is still very much alive, very much present, and even if he wasn't during this time, Lucerys is still his actual Trueborn son. There is no rumor about who his father really is, there is no contest by Vaemon. Lucerys is the heir to Driftmark, and he probably gets engaged to Baela during this timeline instead of Rhaena. So there's that. Jacaerys and Helaena have probably also started having kids now as well. They are in their late teen years, and that's old enough to be a parent in Westeros. So we'll say that the children Helaena originally had with Aegon are now the children she has with Jacaerys. That will be Jaehaerys, Jaehaera, and Maelor. Maybe more, but who knows. Rhaenyra's bloodline is flourishing, and so is the Green bloodline for that matter. Not much out of the ordinary happens. We don't have that petition for the heir of Driftmark or anything like that. We still have the Last Supper of King Viserys though, and like in the original, Viserys does die, but he dies truly knowing that his family has been brought together. And that's a good thing. Good way for him to go out. After that, episode 9 is more so going to center on Rhaenyra than it does Aegon. She's going to ascend to the throne peacefully. She's going to be anointed in front of thousands by a septon, and she's going to be the first ruling queen of Westeros, which is cool. House Targaryen is more united now than it's ever been. And you guys may think that's a bit lackluster, and I can understand that. And I feel like the reason it's a bit lackluster is because I chose not to bring back this one character, and that is Otto. Otto is the main character really pushing for green supremacy in my eyes. Otto is a character who truly believes what he's doing is the right thing for the sake of tradition and precedent. If I had brought Otto back, his issue wouldn't necessarily be the bastardy that Rhaenyra has. His issue is more so that Rhaenyra is a woman and she cannot be allowed to rule. Bastardy was just the issue that the Greens used to justify their rebellion, if that makes sense. And I feel like the bastardy was more so Alicent's issue than it was Otto's. And the reason I say the bastardy was an issue is not necessarily the bastardy itself, but the act of it. Alicent is a person who's been raised constantly to believe in family, duty, tradition, and honor. And every time Rhaenyra acts out, she essentially spits in the face of that. When she had that thing with Daemon, and then Kristen Cole, and then for 10 years she has children that are obviously not her husband's. Alicent trusted Rhaenyra very heavily when she was younger, but she was always told by her father that, hey, if Rhaenyra gets power, she's going to kill your children. Hey, when Rhaenyra gets power, she's going to kill your children. Hey, when Rhaenyra gets power, she is going to kill your children. And Rhaenyra has done nothing to disprove that because she keeps spitting in the face of tradition, honor, duty, and family. These things that Alicent has grown to value. So that's why Alicent goes against her. And because her marriage is actually fruitful, because she's having children, it's not necessarily, oh, the kids are trueborn. It's that Rhaenyra's actually doing her duty. That's what it is that drives Alicent to agree with her this time. Had Otto been here, Rhaenyra's duty wouldn't have mattered. He even says to himself, Rhaenyra could be Jaehaerys himself reborn. She's a woman. She can't sit the Iron Throne. So if in this what if I had brought Otto back, he definitely would have pursued the Dance of the Dragons more than Alicent would have. Because Otto's mentality is that Rhaenyra, a woman, cannot sit the Iron Throne. Alicent's mentality is that Rhaenyra, a dishonorable person, cannot sit the Iron Throne. It's two different things. I mean, you see this in the small council meeting during episode 9. Otto has already made plans, even before Alicent told him that, hey, Viserys told me he wants Aegon to inherit, that he was already planning to take the throne regardless of what Viserys said, and Alicent had no idea. Alicent is more sympathetic and understanding than Otto is, if that makes sense. So if Otto had come back, had I stuck to, oh, Lionel Strong still dies, Otto returns, then yeah, the Dance of the Dragons most likely would still happen with some changes here and there. And I might tackle that what if in the future by bringing Otto back in this same scenario, but we'll see. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I do feel like it was a bit more unorganized than my content usually is, but it doesn't matter. This is a fun little idea that I tried out, and I'm definitely going to come back and do another one, and probably go in a bit more detail, because I know there's probably some stuff I missed here and there. But I hope you guys liked the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell me what you thought in the comments, and I will see you all next time.